18 secretaries in 2 years and 4 months. That was the number, and everybody in the building knew it, and the girls at the temp agency across the city had a private name for the account, which was the Hiroshima meat grinder. Nobody had lasted 8 working days. 2 had walked out at lunch on day 1. 1 had left a resignation letter in the photocopier by mistake, and then also resigned. The official explanation was that Renji Amagi was impossible. He was 43. He ran the Amagi group out of a 5-story building in Nakaku with a legitimate face on 3 of those floors. And he was not a shouter. He was worse than a shouter. He was a man who noticed everything, said very little, and had a way of putting a document back down on a desk that made a person want to go and lie down. He had been told he was impossible so many times that he had come to accept it as a fixed feature of the world, like his height. So, on the morning of the 4th of June, when the agency sent over a 26-year-old with a cardboard box of her own supplies, 3 of the men in the lobby had money on Thursday. Her name was Thandiwinkosi. South African, raised half in Johannesburg and half in Hiroshima, where her father had spent 9 years with a minerals trading firm. Fluent, bilingual, a business administration diploma, 4 years of office experience, and this is what was actually on her record. In the way these things follow you around a mid-sized city, 1 incident. At her last position, she had backed into a table during a client presentation and taken a projector, a laptop, and a tray of coffee onto the floor in front of 11 people, 1 of whom was the client. She had been let go 3 weeks later for unrelated reasons that were entirely related, and after that, every interview in Hiroshima had gone the same polite way. So when the agency said the Amagi account and then said it very carefully, Thandi said yes before the woman had finished the sentence. She tripped on the entrance step at 8:41 in the morning. The box went out of her arms. Pens, a stapler, 4 colored folders, a hole punch, and about 200 index cards went across the lobby floor in front of 6 men who did not move a muscle. She got up, said, "Good morning. I'm the new secretary. Please don't step on the blue ones," and started picking them up. One of the men said, in Japanese, to another man, not quietly enough, "Thursday, Wednesday," said Thandi, in Japanese, from the floor. "Be realistic." She spilled tea on his desk at 11:20 on the first day. Not near the desk. On it. Directly onto the middle of a 4-page document he was in the process of reading, from which the tea then travelled outward with terrible speed while everybody in the room stopped breathing. Renji Amagi lifted the pages, watched the tea run off the corner, and looked at her. And Thandiwinkosi, going red to her ears, said the sentence that is the entire reason there is a story to tell. It's a copy. I photograph and copy everything before I carry it. I do this a lot, so I built the whole system around the assumption that I'm going to do this a lot. There was a pause. "Show me," he said. She showed him. She had been in the building for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and she already had a duplicate of every document she had touched that morning, photographed on her phone with the time visible, a paper diary that mirrored the electronic calendar with everything written twice, once in pencil and once in ink after confirmation. A laminated card taped inside the desk drawer, headed "Things I Have Broken and What I Do Now Instead," which had 9 entries on it and room for more, and a rule, which she explained without embarrassment because she had explained it in 4 previous jobs, that she carried nothing and no one's coffee in the same trip, and that she would rather make 3 trips and be slow than 1 trip and be sorry. Amagi read the laminated card all the way to the bottom. Entry 4, he said. "Never put a cup on a surface where a person's elbow will be." "Whose elbow?" "Mine," said Thandi. "Always mine." That's the tragedy of it. He put the card back in the drawer and said, "Reprint the document," and went back to work. And that was day 1. Day 3. She knocked a fire extinguisher off its bracket in the 3rd-floor corridor, and it went off, and a man called Domori, who had done 9 years for something serious, came out of a meeting room and found the new secretary standing in a cloud of dry powder, entirely white from the collar up, saying, "Please, don't tell anyone." He told everyone. Within an hour there was a photograph. She survived it, and what she has said about that week since is that she had expected to be laughed at, and was, and that the thing that surprised her was that nobody in that building laughed unkindly, because it turned out most of them had done something worse in front of the boss and had never been let off it either. Day 4, she brought in donuts to apologize for the extinguisher and dropped the box in the lift. By the end of the 2nd week, 3 of the 6 men who had been standing in the lobby that first morning had quietly changed their bets. And one of them, the one who had said Thursday, had started opening doors for her without being asked, on the grounds that it removed one variable from the situation. Now, the other thing about that building. Hidenori Kubo was 55 and had been the administrative head of the Amagi organization for 19 years. He had come up under Amagi's father. He ran the office floors, the suppliers, the property management arm, the invoicing and the schedule, and he had been, by universal agreement, an absolute saint about the secretary problem. He handled the hiring, sat in on the interviews, delivered the bad news each time with a sad little shake of the head, and had said more than once in the boss's hearing that perhaps this particular role was simply not one that could be filled. He had been skimming from the property management arm since 2018. It was not spectacular. That is the thing about competent theft. It is boring. Inflated maintenance contracts through 2 suppliers he effectively owned, a percentage on tenant deposits, and a repeating line item for a cleaning contract on a building the group had sold in 2019 and which nobody had noticed because the invoices were correct, arrived on time, and were approved by the man who wrote them. To keep it running, he needed exactly one thing: to remain the only person in that building who saw both the calendar and the invoices. A secretary sees both. So for 2 years and 4 months, every secretary who walked in had a very bad week. Files vanished the day before they were needed. Meeting times were changed in the electronic calendar after they'd been confirmed. Messages were not passed on. Somebody was always told that somebody else had said something. And each time, a young woman found herself standing in front of the most frightening man in the prefecture, unable to explain how she had gotten it so wrong. And each time Kubo was there afterward, kind as anything, saying that it happened to everyone, and that perhaps this was not the place for her. 18 of them. He tried the same things on Thandiwinkosi in her 2nd week. The meeting time changed in the system from 2 o'clock to 3. Her paper diary said 2, in ink, because she had rung the other party to confirm and written it in ink after. She rang again anyway, because it now disagreed, and the meeting was at 2, and the boss was in the room at 1:55. A supplier contract went missing from the file room on a Thursday afternoon. She had photographed all 41 pages on the Tuesday, because she photographs everything, because she is clumsy, and once dropped a folder into a river. A message from a bank came through Kubo and did not arrive. She had already emailed the bank directly to confirm receipt of her own earlier message, a habit from a job where she had once sent a report to the wrong address, and the reply chain had the whole thing in it. By the 5th week, Kubo was not sleeping well. By the 7th week, Thandiwinkosi had been in that office long enough to notice something she could not explain, which is that she had reconciled the property arm's monthly figures 3 times, and the cleaning contract for the Minami-ku building did not appear on the property list she had built herself from the deeds in the safe. She did not accuse anybody. She was 26, and she liked her job, and she was extremely aware of what kind of building she worked in. What she did was put it in the folder with the things she did not understand yet, and keep going. In the 9th week, Kubo stopped being subtle. The tea bowl had belonged to Amagi's mother. It was old. It was cracked and repaired with gold in the way those things are, and it sat on a low shelf in the corner of the office in a stand, and every person who worked in that building knew that it was the one object in the entire 5 stories that was not replaceable. On a Tuesday morning, it was found on the floor in 6 pieces. Thandi arrived at 8:20. She always arrived early, because she assumed she would drop something, and there were already 4 people in the room, and the pieces were on the floor by the shelf, and Kubo was saying, gently, that it was nobody's fault, that these things happen, that the girl was a lovely person and did her best, and that this was exactly the sort of accident that had been waiting to happen since the day she walked into the lobby and threw a box across it. Every single person in that room believed it, including, and she has been very honest about this, for about 4 seconds, Thandi herself, who stood there with her bag on her shoulder frantically trying to remember whether she had gone near that corner the previous evening. Renji Amagi looked at the pieces on the floor for a long moment and said, "Nikosi-san, come with me." She followed him into the corridor, and she was crying by the time the door shut, which she was furious about. "I don't think I did it," she said. "I want to be honest with you, I can't swear it. I've done worse. But I don't think I went to that side of the room yesterday at all, and I don't. Do you photograph the office?" She stopped. "Yes," she said. "Every morning when I arrive and every evening when I leave. All 4 corners. I started it at my second job because a girl there was blamed for something she didn't do, and I decided that was never going to be me." She was already getting her phone out, hands shaking. I've got 12 weeks of it." The photograph from 8:07 that morning showed the corner shelf. It showed the stand, empty, and the floor beneath it, clean, and no pieces anywhere. The pieces appeared on the floor at some point between 8:07 and 8:19, which was after Thandiwinkosi arrived in the building and before she reached the office, during which time she was downstairs at the front desk signing for a delivery in front of 2 witnesses and a camera. Renji Amagi stood in the corridor of his own building and looked at a photograph on a 26-year-old's phone for a very long time. Then he said, quietly, "Show me the folder of the things you do not understand yet." She had not told him there was one. He had worked it out about 6 weeks earlier, because he was a man who noticed everything and had said nothing, because he had wanted to see what she did. The rest of it took 11 days and 2 forensic accountants. The cleaning contract on a building sold in 2019. 2 maintenance suppliers with the same registered address as a car park owned by Kubo's brother-in-law. 6 years and about 94 million yen, all of it approved by the man who prepared it, in an organization where nobody had ever thought to ask, because he had been there since before most of them. What happened to Hidenori Kubo happened inside the organization, and there is very little to say about it except that he is not in Hiroshima, and that the money came back, most of it, over 18 months, out of property. The thing that Renji Amagi did afterwards is the part that people who tell this story usually leave out, and it is the best part. He sat down with the personnel file and made a list of 18 names. Then, he wrote to every single one of them. Not a form letter. 18 letters, over about a month. Each one saying roughly the same 3 things: that the failures she had been dismissed for had been manufactured by a third party for reasons that had nothing to do with her. that he had been told she was incompetent and had believed it, and that the believing was his fault and not the telling, and that, if she wished, a correction would be sent to any future employer, and a payment representing the notice she had not been given was available, and was hers regardless of whether she answered the letter. 11 of them cashed it. 6 wrote back. 1 rang the office in tears and talked to him for 40 minutes. 2 came back to work for the group, and one of them, Sasaki Mio, who had lasted 6 days in the spring of the first year, is now the head of the property arm, and is by all accounts terrifying. And 1 wrote a letter back that said only, "I spent 2 years thinking I was stupid. Thank you for the correction. I am not coming back." Which he keeps. Thandiwinkosi did not become chief of staff immediately. It took 4 years, and she made him put it through a proper process with other candidates, because she had strong feelings on the subject of being handed things. She is 34 now. She runs the administrative side of the entire group. There are 206 people in that organization, and every single one of them knows that if you want something to be true in that building, it has to exist twice. Once in the system and once on paper. And that Nikosi-san will photograph it, and that she will ring you to confirm, and that this is not negotiable, and has not been negotiable for 8 years. The duplication rule is written into the group's procedures. It is Item 1. It is called, in the actual document, in Japanese, the Nikosi rule, and she has tried 3 times to get the name changed and has been overruled each time, once by a vote. She is still clumsy. That never went anywhere. She is broken since taking the job. 2 monitors, a glass door, her own wrist, and a supplier's award trophy at a dinner. Entry 22 on the laminated card in her desk drawer reads "Never gesture while holding anything at all." And it is underlined twice, and she does not follow it. The tea bowl was repaired. There is a man in Kyoto who does that work, and it took 9 months, and there is now considerably more gold in it than there used to be, which is either a shame or the entire point depending on how you feel about that sort of thing. It sits on the same shelf. Renji Amagi moved it exactly once, about a foot to the left, so that it is no longer at the height of anybody's elbow. He has never explained why, and nobody in that building has ever had the nerve to ask him. And these days, when something falls over on one of the office floors of a 5-story building in Nakaku, a stack of folders, a chair, a jug, there is a particular sound that follows, which is the sound of 206 people carrying on with what they were doing without so much as looking up. That is not because they have stopped noticing. It is because in that building, for 8 years now, that sound has meant that the person who noticed everything and the person who drops everything are both still there, and that between the 2 of them, whatever it was, there is a copy.